फिर एक साथ बैकग्राउंड सबका चेंज नहीं हो सकता क्या? या आपने डिफॉल्ट कर रखा है? अच्छा, ये ज़्यादा अच्छा है, थोड़ा सा डार्क है तो। स्टार्ट करें सर? साउंड ठीक है? साउंड नहीं आ रही है? हेलो? चलिए देन, so let's discuss the paper of 2022. That so the first questions, I mean, which we have done in the class is question number 2 for the 10 marks of 150 words. The question says, right of movement and residence throughout the territory of India are freely available to Indian citizens, but these rights are not absolute. So how to tackle these questions? What should be the strategy? Right to movement and residence throughout India. Right to movement, right to movement and residence. क्या ये नहीं दिख रहा है? So this right to movement and residence mentioned under Article 9. Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause D. E is a practice you can profess. E, yes, D and E. Right to movement is under D and E. Right? So this you need to be first defined the movement given under Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause D. नहीं, इंट्रोडक्शन हम यहाँ से स्टार्ट करेंगे कि राइट टू मूवमेंट एंड रेसिडेंस किसका पार्ट है. तो इट इज अ पार्ट ऑफ फ्रीडम ऑफ मूवमेंट, आर्टिकल 19, एंड this comes under the freedom of speech and expressions under article 19, and article 19 clause 1 sub clause D talks about the right to movement throughout nation, throughout the territory of India. And this is under article 19 clause 1 sub clause D. Then article 19 clause 1 sub clause E talks about the residence, right to reside in anywhere in territory of India. But this is not an absolute right. These two altogether was restricted by the article 19 clause 5. Yes or no? So that clause has to be mentioned, and we need to comment on this, means restrictions, impositions, and why. Emergency. No, emergency is not a restrictions. See this, no. This question is related only to the restrictions under Article 19, reasonable restrictions which we have discussed. So in little bit we need to also restrict about the reasonable restrictions which is imposed by the Article 19 itself. Article 19 clause 5 that we have written. So that has to be mentioned here. Along with this, we can also write inner line permit, which also restrict the movement in certain areas. Inner line permit, movement and residence is also restrict. Yes or no? Like Arunachal Pradesh. The recent was added about Manipur in 2019. Though it is not yet implemented in the Manipur, but it has been added. So that has to be also discussed in these questions. Are you getting my point? Yes or no? लेकिन यहाँ पर उसके बेसिस पर नहीं है ना, दैट इज एन दैट इज नॉट अ नॉर्मल कोर्स ना, अगर कभी नहीं लगे तब. हाँ, तो that, yes, it is not absolute because it comes with the restrictions. Rights are not absolute. Rights which comes with restrictions, and that restriction should be reasonable restrictions, which has been mentioned in Article 19, not a national emergency. If suppose that the emergency is based on an internal armed rebellion, then Article 19 may not be suspended, because it may only suspended automatically when the imposition of emergency on the base of war and external aggressions under 315(8) will be applicable. So this questions is focused on basically on Article 19. If you want to mention that if there is under Article 32, which is an exceptional case, it is not talking about the exceptional case. So you can mention under 1 or 2 line if you want, but that is not asked in the examinations. So this is how this answer should be treated. This is the conclusion all about that, right? There is no right to separate a conclusion. There is no need to write a separate conclusion under this. What you can do is you can write like in a bracket where you can use that Article 19 clause 1 contains how many rights? 6. So these two among the 6 of these rights, because it has specifically asked to the movement and residence throughout the territory of India freely available to Indian citizens. Are you getting my point? So you can start with this, that it comes under the Article 19 clause 1, which has 6 rights, and these two are among the rights mentioned in clause D and clause E. Clause D talks about the professions. Any of the profession you want, you can profess. And the professions clause G is restricted with Article 19 clause 6. We have made a chart, and through chart we have seen this. Yes or no? If you remember that we have seen that Article 19 clause 1, Article 19 provides 2 types of rights. One right to the rights to citizen, and the second is right to states in the form of reasonable restrictions. And this article clause 1 is a right of citizens. First talks about the freedom of speech and expressions. Then second, assembly, Clause C talks about the associations. D talks about the movement. E talks about the residence. And G talks about the practice any profession. And the G was F was deleted, omitted by the 44th, right to property. Are you getting the point? And these rights were to be restricted by the states under Article 19 Clause 2, which is applicable to this. It has given eight or nine grounds on which the state can impose restrictions on the freedom of speech and expressions, like sovereignty of India, security of India, then integrity of India, then public order, morality or decency, incitement of offense, contempt of court, friendly relations with foreign nations. So these are the restrictions imposed by the Article 19, and these are only the reasonable restrictions. And we have also learned that this public order was added after the Crossroad case. The circulation of the Crossroad newspaper was banned by the Tamil Nadu government on the basis of public order. And the judiciary says that the public order is not a reasonable restriction part of Article 19. So after that judgment, they have added the public order in Article 19 Clause 2. Yes or no? समझ रहे हैं? Same questions. Are you getting my point? If the exam would have happened 1 month, it had to happen 1 month later, then there are many questions which would have been covered from the class. President elections. Last year, the French elections has been concluded. French president election is concluded last year. No, this year only. This year, in the month of March or April. In the month of March or April, the French president was elected. Now the question has been asked with the election of the French and Indian president is related to the critically examine the procedure through which the president of India and France are elected. Critically examine, it means we need to give an drawbacks of also. Here in India, it is indirectly elected with the single transferable vote. It means, but in the France, the election of the president held in 2 phases. If in the first phase none of the candidate got a majority, clear-cut majority, they need a clear-cut majority. If they do not get clear-cut majority, then the top 2 candidates, 1 and 2, will again be voted in the next week. And among these top 2 will be decided as an through an absolute majority, will be decided as a winner of a parliament. France. So this would have been covered, because the next we are going to do the union executive. नहीं, न्यूज़ में इसलिए था, मैं बता रहा हूँ, क्योंकि वहाँ जो नेशनल असेंबली था, वहाँ पर इमैनुअल जो थे, मतलब वहाँ का जो प्रेसिडेंट फ्रांस के, he did not make it to the government, but still he is a president, because they have a presidential form of government, and we have seen that in the presidential form of government, the executives are not necessary to be member of the legislature. So if they can form a government, it's okay. If not, then also they can be the president. But in India, it is not like that. The president in India is an titular head, nominal head. We can say that, not a real head. But the France has, as we have seen the presidential elections, we have seen certain example also. He is a real head, like a USA. British is not a presidential election, it's a parliamentary form of order. USA. Yeah, they form the same. It's clear? So I hope that now this can be written. Question 2. Should I change the color of the pen? It is visible? दिख रहा है ना? I thought you all would have your questions, because in the last class you said that we got a questions on. So write down the questions then. If you do not have, पिक्सल फट जाएगा. मैं जूम कितना भी कर दूं ना. This is search. Do you have this, or you can write down the question? You can write down the questions. Write down the questions. Question. तो खोलिए ना सर, मिला है तो क्यों रखे हैं फिर. लास्ट अगर इस बार का पेपर आपके पास, आई थॉट दैट यू वुड हैव इन योर दैट ग्रुप. Come to the question number 2 then. Is this clear? Now you can write down the question. Now you can write down the answer. So at least try those questions with what we have done in the class, because this is a direct questions from our class. We can say that. जिन्होंने क्लास किया उनकी बात कर रहा हूं मैं. ठीक है? So do you all get the question? Share with, send them to also. You get the questions? Do you have the questions? Good. Now if we see the next question. Now suppose that third question is asking about go to the third questions. Though we have not yet started decentralizations, we have not started yet the part of the this questions, but to what extent, in your opinion, has the decentralization of power in India changed the governance landscape at the grassroots level? So first, what we need, what we have to discuss here, how we can initiate. Now word limit is 150. The word limit is 150, 10 marks questions. इस साल के क्वेश्चंस का जो पैटर्न अभी तक का जो रहा है ना, that is easy to moderate. And this means that easy to moderate is within the reach of an students, if they have been very clear. So how we should start these questions? To what extent, in your opinion, has the decentralization of power in India changed the governance landscape at the grassroots level? So if first of all we need to describe how the decentralization of power in India happened. Before the 73rd and 74th of the Constitutional Amendment Act, we have a two-tier government. Central and state government. And decentralization process, though it was mentioned in Article 40, organization of village panchayat, we have done this. Yes or no? आप ही लोगों से पूछ रहा हूं. Right? So decentralization is done through the 73rd and 74th. So now here it asks that how the decentralization of power in India is changed the governance landscape. It is not talking about the executive, it is talking about the governance, not legislation, but governance, how the executive has done, how the functions has done. So we need to talk about the governance at the landscape or the grassroots level. So what should be the answer? सिर्फ पंचायत ही करेंगे डिस्कस. First of all, we need to discuss the decentralization of power. Now how it has changed the governance? It give power to the local hand. They have been powered with managing their own affairs, management of school, management of gram sabha. Though before the 73rd and 74th amendment, they were done through the state or either through the center. So this has provided the two new scheduled, 11th schedule and 12th schedule. Nahi. So this has provided two schedule, 11th schedule and 12th schedule. It under these two schedules, they have mentioned the items of those subject which should be administered by these two. So they have been given power to decide what is good for them and what is not. So this has to be mentioned. How it has transformed the governance part of the country. Earlier, everything has to be done through the center or state, through the district. Now the district is not the sole responsible for the development of grassroots, but the village panchayat, gram sabha, is the first to implement, to suggest what is good for them. So it has changed. Earlier everything has to be, it was kind of unitary from the district. Now the power, earlier 73rd and 74th, the power was going from up to downward. Infiltrations, upward to downward. But after the 73rd, it has started moving upwards. They make the plans, their suggestions were good, go up, so what is good for them. Then it would be reached to the district, intermediate level. There are three tier again: gram sabha, panchayat, gram panchayat, then intermediary level, and then district level. So this has changes the plan. So this has to be written there. Yes or no? क्लियर? IR से क्वेश्चन डायरेक्ट क्वेश्चंस थे. अगर आप इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस का क्वेश्चंस अगर आप देखें तो दे आर द डायरेक्ट क्वेश्चंस. अगर मैं बात करूं, देखिए जैसे दिस वन, सी that's why I always used to say that you should be go with the government plans. गवर्नमेंट प्लान से हमेशा क्वेश्चंस होंगे. गति शक्ति योजना, need meticulously coordinations between the government and the private sector to achieve the goal of connectivity. So we should know what is gati sati yojana. This is related to the current. Are you getting the point? Then National Commission for Backward Classes is a wake of its transformations from statutory body to constitutional body. It has been made a constitutional body. National Commission for Backward Classes. Yes, there always be a, because this is one of the topics, social justice. Social justice. This is the inclusion of the topic in paper 2. That's why they ask women, children. There is again one more questions from the related to children. The Article 21A. Then right of persons with disability, Article 2016. It is again from the social justice. So the plan has to be prepared. Now this direct benefit transfer scheme is progressive state, but it has its limitations too. JBT, then Jam Trinity, Jandhan, Aadhaar, Mobile, related to direct benefit transfer. Getting it or not? क्वेश्चंस इस बार बहुत इजी टू मॉडरेट थे, ज़्यादा टफ नहीं था. यू कैन राइट इट वेरी इजली. Right? Then right of children to free and compulsory education 2009. It asks that remains inadequate in promoting incentive based system for children's educations without generating awareness about the importance of schools. Means what does this want? It says that remains inadequate in promoting incentive based system for general education without generating awareness. So most of the, it means we need to discuss about the midday meal scheme, Sarva Shiksha, because they come to for the meal to the schools. The midday meal scheme has only one, it has a benefit, that is retain, and it reduce the dropout. It retained the students in the school because of the midday meal. They are not in a school for the educations. So the drawbacks of this has to be discussed. Analyzing means you need to give both the points, in favor also and in its. You need to evaluate that given statement whether it is true or not. Answer would be same. That's it, just changes with little bit. You need to analyze something, which means you need to analyze by thoroughly analyzing about the merit and demerit of these things. If it requires, yes, if it conclusion you need, then yes, what should be done. You have a scope of 250 words. So in 50 words you can write the way forward suggestions. See, it 250, the 50 should be the introductions about the 2009, which had changes in by the 21A, right to educations. Right to educations came in 2002 through the 86 constitutions, which has leads to the, after the 6 years of this free educations, had lead the government to form a legislative law related to this. It is related to this. Yes or no? Are you getting the point? What we need to write? If you see this, how I2, U2 grouping transforms India position in global politics. This is direct questions. नहीं, क्वेश्चंस आप लोगों ने क्वेश्चन देखा या नहीं? कैसा लगा क्वेश्चन देख करके? वो तो उनके मतलब क्वेश्चन एक होता है, क्वेश्चन देखो क्या पूछा समझ नहीं आया, एक क्वेश्चन अगर लगा समझ में आ रहा है, राइट? हाँ, need to write, that has to be discussed na, but what we have done in the class, that should be clear cut. Abhi tak ke class mein that one question was there. End of the class you will see the from the polity sections, the most was within our reach. Most of them were within a reach. And once we complete paper 2, 80 to 90% of this question of the 2022 will be within your reach, except the current that has to be prepared. Yes or no? Clear? So let's start what we are discussing, what we left. State emergency. Allowed. It allowed the through the Minerva mill also. Intentions of imposition of emergencies under judicial review. Uh, no. See, judicial review says that the intention behind the impositions of proclamation of emergency can be challenged. It is said by the 44th Second Amendment, 44th Constitutional Amendment Act that whenever the national emergency under Article 352 was proclaimed, can be challenged under a court due to the malafide, which need to prove that intentions of the impositions. And we have also written that the satisfaction is not only the satisfaction of president, but the satisfaction should be of the cabinet. Now you want to ask, your question is that if there is an emergency imposed in a country and certain rights has been suspended by the presidential order, so if that right is violated, can anyone move to the court? This is your questions. But it was suspended. How it can be violations? Suspended means what? You cannot enjoy that right. And if you have a remedy against those rights, then how it can be suspended? Then what's the use of suspending those rights? This what we have discussed under this case, that is ADM Jabalpur case, where I have taught Shukla, ADM Jabalpur S. Shukla case, where it has approached the High Court under Article 226 and he has been arrested under MISA, Maintenance of Internal Security Act, this under ADJ Jabalpur Court case, where he has challenged his detentions and he has approached the High Court, various High Courts under 226, where High Court has provided him relief, right? But then after the judgment of the High Court, the authority has moved to the Supreme Court. And we have discussed that what line the Supreme Court has to discuss. So there is only two lines on the basis of which the Supreme Court has to discuss or to hear is the first, that whether High Court is eligible to hear the petition under Article 226 during the imposition of emergency in 1975. Because if the High Court is not been under jurisdictions to hear the case, he cannot pronounce his judgment to be certiorari quas beyond the jurisdictions. Are you getting that we have done? So the Supreme Court says that the High Court is not in a position to hear the petitions during under the 226 during that emergency. So the relief granted by the High Court was not sufficient. So the High Court was bound not to is not in a jurisdictions, in his jurisdictions to hear the cases. That what we have discussed in Jabalpur's case, ADM Jabalpur versus S. Shukla case. Yes or no? Now I hope it's clear. Okay. Shall we move? So we are discussing article 350, 356 and 355 we have discussed, and 356 we have discussed certain pros. Clause 1 we have discussed, na? (356) talks about the failure of constitutional machineries. Machineries in states. So the clause 1 talks about that the president, if the president on receipt of a report from the governor or otherwise, right? So if the president on report received from governor or otherwise. Now we have discussed the meaning of this otherwise. We have discussed that the president is not only imposed or bound to act only the advice of the governor. The president can also act without the advice of governor. Yes or no? Any other advice, so that's why it says or otherwise. So the article 356 clause 1 does not bound the president to act only on the advice of the governor to impose president rule. So it says if the president on report received from governor or otherwise satisfied that. Now here the word satisfied is applicable similar to those that what we have discussed in 352. Satisfaction is not only of the president but it is of the cabinet, that the state government is not running accordance to constitution. Then he proclaimed emergency, national emergency. So how we will proclaim, what he will do? First, it says that the president will assume all or any power exercised by the governor or any other authority other than state legislature. Means the governor, whatever the power is of a governor is been exercised in a state under the president rule, it will be shifted to the president, but not the legislature power. Are you getting the point? Yes or no? Right? So assume all any power exercised by governor or any other authority other than state legislative assembly. Clear? Then B talks about that it says that president will declare that the power all or any of the state legislative assemblies will be exercised by the parliament. Means the parliament is based on after the imposition of the president rule in state with the power to exercise in the name of the state legislative assembly. Yes or no? Right? So here says, so B says that the president allows the parliament to assume all or any power exercised by the state legislative assembly. ठीक है, this we have discussed. Then also the C says the president may make such other laws, incidental laws, which is required for the proclamation of emergency. So the president may make laws which is important for the proclamation of emergency. This is clause 1. It's clear? This we have discussed. Now the clause 2 of the article 356. It is similar to that of the article 352. So what is the clause 2 of the 352 says? Any such proclamations means related to the state emergency may varied or revoked by the subsequent proclamations. So article clause 2 says that any such proclamations may be revoked or varied by subsequent proclamations. Is this clear? So this is clause 2. ठीक है. Now before starting the clause 3, we need to understand one thing, that as we know that in the article 352, under article 352, imposition of national emergency, the state government does not suspend. Right? Without suspending, they come under the direct control of the union. Right? This we have done. So under 356, after the imposition of the president rule, so the state government will be suspended under this. Yes. So when it will be suspended? As soon as the proclamation of emergency will imposed, then after the parliament approved the emergency. So clause 3 talks about that the proclamation of emergency should be led before both house of parliament. And by what majority does the parliament pass? Simple majority. Simple majority, total membership minus absent minus absentees. So clause 3 says, clause 3 talks about that the proclamation of emergency should be led before the both houses of parliament. Yes. No, that it will not have an effect. It will only suspend after the parliament approve that bill. There no. Till the approval. That's why I had asked you the questions now. When the state legislature will be suspended? After the approval is done by the parliament. has to be act, yes, either through the elections. After dissolution, the election has to be done, right? Now here the conditions which related to the approval by the parliament is slightly different from that approval of the national emergency. So what is the difference is here is that in the approval done by the approval by both houses of parliament by simple majority, right? Simple majority, that means total membership of the house minus absentees. This is what the total membership of the house means, simple majority. Now both house of parliament will give a lease of 2 months. Within a period of 2 months, they have to approve the emergency precedent rules. And at the time of one's approval, the life of the emergency will be 6 months. And this is given under clause 4. But suppose the conditions that before approving the emergency, the Lok Sabha get dissolved, as the case we have discussed under the national emergency. So the situations and circumstances or the criteria is similar. There also it says that it will have a life of. Now here the time period is different from the national emergency. In the national emergency, the parliament get only the lease of 1 month or 30 days. Here they are getting a lease of 2 months. But suppose if that before approving the national emergency, the Lok Sabha get dissolved, right? Then it says that the emergency will cease to effect after 30 days from the first sitting of newly constituent assembly. It means that as soon as the Lok Sabha get dissolved, right, provided in between the Rajya Sabha has to be ratified the national precedent rule. It's clear? So here says if the Lok Sabha get dissolved before approving the precedent rule, right? So the precedent rule will have a life of 30 days from the date of constituting of the Lok Sabha after elections. So after elections and the first sitting of the Lok Sabha, they will get only a period of 30 days, and within a period of 30 days, they need to ratify the precedent rule, provided the Rajya Sabha has ratified during that period. Is this clear? This is the same case what we have discussed in the national emergency. There is the only difference here about the time period that has 2 months. In originally they get a period of 2 months. In national emergency they get a period of 1 month. But after dissolutions, the Lok Sabha get the same period of time of the 30 days. Is this clear? Any doubt? Right? Once the parliament approved, so clause 4 talks about that life of the state emergency will be 6 months. So at one approval by the parliament, the life get to the precedent rule is only for the 6 months, and the maximum time, a maximum period for what the precedent rule can exist is 3 years. In a straight year. If after approval, if after every 6 months they approve again, they approve the president rule, so they can only approve for the 3 years, not more than 3 years. After the completion of a 3 years, not the president nor neither president nor parliament has power to impose president rule again. It means that after the completion of 3 years, they have to the union government has to establish the normal constitutional bodies, constitutional government through elections. More than three years, the president rule cannot exist in a country, in any state. I'm not talking about the national emergency. I'm just talking about the state emergency. State, we are dealing with the state emergency. War, on the basis of war, it can be imposed a national emergency, not the president rule. The president rule can be imposed on only that the state is not running accordance to the constitutions, article 355 or 365, where it says that the union government has been powered by the constitutions to give directions to the state legislative assembly, and if the state legislative assembly does not or it disobey the directions given by the union, then union use article 356 against that state. It means while performing the duties under article 355, it says that it is a duty of the state to protect the state from internal disturbance or external aggression. And also we have seen that the 352 based on two powers on the union government. If you remember, article 355 talks about, it gives two power to the union government. The first is to protect the state government, the state, from internal disturbance or external aggression. This is the first duty given by the 355, and the second duty is to, it says that they need to keep watch whether the state government is running accordance to the constitutions or not. So they keep watch whether state government running accordance to the constitution, and by performing of this duty, they can impose the president rule, state emergency. So along with this, we have also seen the article 365, which give power to the union government to give direction to the state government to do certain, to follow certain directives. If they disobey the directives given under article 365, then the union government in a position to impose the emergency under state emergency, constitutional failure emergency, failure of constitutional machinery in the state government. 365 abhi to discuss, we have discussed in the last class in the Friday. Is this clear? So this so as we are discussing, by the article clause 3, article 356 clause 3 talks about the proclamation has to be tabled in the both house of parliament, and the house of parliament by the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha with a simple majority, then they will approve the president rule within a 2 months of period. हाँ बोलिए. Within a 2 months. Within a 2 months. Within a 2 months. But if suppose that before approving Lok Sabha get dissolved, then it will get a life of 30 days from the day on which the Lok Sabha, newly constituted Lok Sabha, started its sitting. The first day of the sitting, within 30 days of that period, they have to approve the president rule, provided Rajya Sabha has approved it meanwhile. No. Because only the Lok Sabha is a subject to dissolution. Both houses has to approve, na? In the terms of national emergency, disapproval national emergency, Lok Sabha has an upper hand. Without the permission of Rajya Sabha. It has a much power than Rajya Sabha. But in case of approving the national emergency or approving the state emergency or approving the financial emergency, they have the same power. This has to be approved by both the houses. But this condition has been mentioned because the Lok Sabha is only subject to dissolution. The Rajya Sabha cannot get dissolved. It is not subject to dissolution. That's why this subject is only applicable to the Lok Sabha, which is a matter of dissolutions. Is this clear? So after the one approval, the life of the president rule will get a 6 month. Is this clear? Any doubt till here? And the maximum period a president rule in a single stance can be there for 3 years. It means after the end of the 3 years, not in a the president, either the president or a parliament is not in a position to impose again a president rule. They have to restore the constitutional government in the state. Is this clear? Sorry. अब उसका इलेक्शन कराना ही होगा. नहीं, उस एक बार गवर्नमेंट आ गई तो फिर लगा दे, दैट्स अ डिफरेंट थिंग. But without a government, the state cannot be more than 3 years. Because 355. Religious, for what? Ground for what? Yes, those are the directives which has been mentioned in a constitution that has to be followed by the state government. Or suppose, like we will discuss, there is one case related to this, is SR Bomani case. SR Bomai case, right? So that came in 1994. Before that also, there is said that when after the 1975, when the national emergency was imposed, and after 77 the Indira Gandhi lost her power, the Janta government has came into power, right? As the Janta government assumed the office in union government, they have suspended 9 state government because those 9 state governments are opposite to the central government, parties which were ruling in the central government. So there is no ground. So they have challenged their suspensions of the constitutional government in the court. So at that in 1977, their challenge was rejected by the judiciary because they said it is up to the state, central government, union government, on the basis of that they can suspend. But again this has happened. When the Janta government has failed, and again the Indira Gandhi came back, she has also repealed the 9 government. So in 1994, there again a case in the SR Bomai case where the Supreme Court has given a guidelines, and which of one of the guideline says that the central government cannot suspend or impose a precedent rule in a state on the basis of change of a party in a power. So this should not be the basis, which has happened twice. Once after the in the 1977 when the Janta government came into power, on again when the Janta government has lose the power and Indira Gandhi came back to the power. So this has happened twice. So this has also neglected in the Bomai case. So there is no specific ground on which it can be said that the emergency can be imposed. It says that if the state government disobey the directives under Article 365, which empower the central government to give directives to be followed by the state government. And if suppose any directives which the state government, central government give to the any state government, and that state government disobey that directives, means they do not follow that directives, then it is empowered by the constitutional power under Article 355 that we have discussed it. What does the mean running not accordance to the constitution in the last class? It means that if it is not following any of the directives given by the union government under 365, it falls under that it is not running according to the constitutions, which leads to the ground for the imposition of 356. Now is it clear? Is this clear? So we are discussing the life. So this now what there has been change. There has been a change by the 42nd amendment also in this life of the precedent rule, and that changes has again been changed by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act. So first of all, we will see the what the changes has been done by the 42nd Amendment Act. So as we know, as today's there is a says that after the once approval, the life of the state emergency will be 6 months. And after the completion of 6 months, again, if the parliament wants that the state emergency should be in a positions or continued, again they have to approve by the same method which has been talked in the clause 3. And if suppose that in reapproval again the Lok Sabha get dissolved, then there is a time limit of a 30 days after the reconstitutions of a newly elected Lok Sabha. They will get a 30 days period, and within a 30-day period they have to approve, provided the Raj Sabha has approved it, right? So this, and by this reapproving they can only extend a precedent rule up to the 3 years of time, but each time they have to approve after every 6 months. Are you getting my point? Now by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976, this the life what has been today as a 6 month has been changed to 1 year. It means after the approval get by the parliament, the precedent rule in a state will get a life of 1 year. And the second change, they have said that after the approval, if they want to continue for the 3 years, after 1 year they can directly move to the 3 years without any restrictions. This has been changed by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. Are you getting my point? So life of the precedent rule was changed to 1 year, which was 6 months earlier also. Before the 42nd also, the life in the original constitution was 6 months only, which has been changed by the 42nd Amendment Act and made the life after approval, and it will be given to the 1 year. Is this clear? Now, so by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, it has made 2 changes. The 44th Constitutional Amendment Act 1978 has made 2 changes. First, it restored the life to 6 months. Means It has restored the earlier life before the life which before it was 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, the original life of the emergency. Is this clear? This was the first changes made by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act. Yes or no? Second change, they have added a clause 5 in Article 356. Now, clause 5 talks about the conditions of continuations of a president rule in a state. So it says, the clause 5 says, if though the time of the life period was 6 months and the maximum life of this president rule will be 3 years. But if president, the clause 5 says, if the parliament wants to continue the president rule beyond 1 year, and that the approval should be based on 2 conditions. The first, that the proclamation should be existing. There should be a proclamation in the state. Second says, the report from the election commission, that which election commission suggests that it is impossible for the time period to conduct an election in that state, so that's why the emergency should be continued. If these two criteria will satisfied by the house, then the house can approve an emergency beyond 1 year. Are you getting the point? The first, they have under clause 5, the first says the proclamation should be in a place under which they have to approving, and second says that if the election commission give a report and says that the state should have a proclamation of emergency because the time is not good or it is impossible to conduct an election, fresh elections to the state legislative assembly, so or either election commission is not in a positions to conduct an election to the state legislative assembly for that period. So on the basis of these 2 reasons, the parliament can approve the national emergency beyond 1 year, which was added by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, which before the 44th means by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, it is extended beyond any limitations to the 3 years. So they have imposed a restrictions on the approving power of parliament beyond 1 year. Yes, every time the life will be 6 months. Every approval of a president rule will give a life of 6 months. They can, and the president rule can be exist for the maximum of 3 years, not more than that, as we have discussed. Beyond 3 year, the state constitutional machinery, that is, election should be conducted in that state where the election is been conducted, where the president rule is proclaimed. So beyond 3 years, no president rule can be exist. It is constitutional duty on the union. It also says that neither the president nor the parliament is empowered to extend or in a position to proclaim emergency beyond 3 years. So they are bound to conduct an fresh elections to restore the constitutional government in the state. Is this clear? Any doubt? So this is 356. Any doubt? Clause 5. So as I am discussing the clause 5, as we says that the two major changes has been done by the 44th constitutions. One, it has corrected the time period which was changed by the 42nd Amendment Act. The 42nd Amendment Act has approved the life of the president rule for 1 year. 1 year, right? And that has been changed by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, which has restored the original life which has been mentioned in the constitutions, in the original constitutions, which was 6 months. It's clear? So it restored the original life of the president rule. This is one change has been made by the 44th. Second, it has added, though they have not added a new, what they have done, they have you can say that remove the earlier or older clause 5 and they have added a new clause 5 to the 356. So the new clause 5 of article 356 says that if, as we know, that the parliament has empowered to approve the president rule beyond after every 6 months, if they want to continue the president rule in a state government, and for the maximum of 3 years they can get make an approval to this, right? But clause 5 says that if the parliament wants to approve beyond a year, means twice, within a twice they can approve the continuation of a national emergency. But beyond a year, if they want, beyond a 1 year, if they want to approve the president rule in a state, then that approval has to be satisfied by the two conditions. First conditions, clause 8 talks about that at the time of approval, the proclamation of emergency should be there, which they are approving. Is this clear? Second says that the election commission has reported that the continuation of proclamation of emergency should be in place because it is difficult for the election commission to conduct an election to that state where the imposition of president rule is done. So if these two provisions are satisfied by the parliament, then it can extend the life of a president rule in a state. But if suppose that the election commission said that we are ready to conduct an election in a state, or we are in a position to conduct the state, and if the parliament go beyond that, though they will not go beyond, because in the parliament the approval will be done by both the houses, right? Again, if suppose that on the basis of that it can be also be challenged that the clause 5 has been violated by the parliament. Is this clear? Any doubt? So this is 356. Anything you want to ask? Nothing? So now the 357 talks about the effect of emergency. Rather, we should say, what are the effect of emergency? A presidential rule in state. So article 357 says, as we know, as we have seen, that which authority will exercise the power of the state legislative assembly? Parliament. So 357 talks about that the parliament exercise the power of state legislative assembly, right? Second, it says that parliament can allow the president to make laws related to state. It means it also confer the president power to make laws related to the president. It means the president can also make law related to that state only if the parliament has allowed the president, not only the parliament which make a law. So exercising the power of a state legislative assembly means making law related to that. Yes or no? समझ रहे हैं या नहीं? Right? So this is first. This is second. It says that parliament confer a power on the president to make laws related to the state in which the president rule is an proclamations or is in continuations. It means if the parliament is not in sessions or if the Lok Sabha is not in sessions, so in place of that, president can also make rules related to that state. If and only if the condition is that if it was allowed or it was conferred by the parliament, right? Right? Third says that parliament can also confer the power to the president to delegate his power, which power is given by the parliament to the president, to other authority also. It means that if the parliament has given a power to the parliament has given power to the president to do laws related to the state. So it has also means that the parliament has conferred a power on president that it can also delegate its power of law making process related to the state to other authority also. Only if the parliament can allow it. Are you clear? Are you getting my point? So it says that parliament confer the power on president to delegate his power of lawmaking to the state, to another authorities. Is this clear? Yes or no? Any doubt? Such power can be delegated to any other. Anything, any difficulty you are getting in understanding this? The parliament has bestowed a power to the president that it can regulate any law related to state. So 357 also said that it is a power to the president to delegate that power which the president has bestowed upon him to such other authority, any other authority, but only after the parliament allows so. Anyone, any governor, council, any authority. There is no definition of any other authority. Any committee or any group, anybody. The law? No. Intentions, on the basis of intentions, yes. Malafide, always. Malafide. On the basis of malafide, it can be challenged in a court of law. Is this clear? Now the next clause under 350, these are not the clauses of the article 356. Remind me. Let you remind you. These are only the part which I have just bifurcated to easy to understand in different subsections. So the last section says, if suppose the Lok Sabha is not in session, so the the president is allowed to appropriate a fund from the consolidated fund of state, which is subject to the parliament approval. If it means that if Lok Sabha is not in sessions for that period and the fund is to be used of a state consolidated fund, then during the president rule that will be used by the president, and when the Lok Sabha come into sessions they have to approve it, which is subject to approval by the parliament. Now, is this clear? Any doubt? This is article 357. He not his personal, but yes, not used. He has appropriated that fund for the state use, like payment of the judges of the high court, any expenditure running in the executive will approve during the emergence, during that. Yes, subject to approval of a parliament. Parliament will also present a budget related to that state which is under a precedent rule. This we will do in a budget. That appropriations from the consolidated fund of state has to be approved by the parliament, because without an legislation's permissions, no one can withdraw a money from consolidated fund of either from the state or either from India. That has to be approved by the legislature. Due to this legislature is not in a functions, it is suspended of a state legislature during the precedent rule, that approval will be given by the parliament. Are you getting the point? But before that, if the Lok Sabha is not in sessions and there is a appropriations of money is to be done by the president from the consolidated fund of the states, fund of state, it is allowed by the 357 that the president can appropriate that sum from consolidated. But when the Lok Sabha come into sessions, they have to approve it. Yes. And the money can be appropriated for the payment of the, you can say, judiciaries, Lok Sabha, High Court judiciaries, payment judges. There are many running a cost effect. If the 3 years, if 6 months is a time period of a precedent rule, but the state needs of money, state needs a sum to run, the executive needs, the payment has to be done. So that will be the payment is withdrawn from the consolidated fund of state with the approval of a legislature. But if the Lok Sabha is not in sessions, it is power given to the president that it can allow to appropriate fund, but that will have to be approved by the parliament. What before that? Is not in a sessions. If then they will approve, because we have seen the parliament will exercise the power of a. Yes, yeah, sure. What that's why I am saying. That's why I said the appropriation of money from the consolidated fund of India or state is only appropriations after the approval of a legislature. No one can withdraw money from the consolidated fund of state without the approval of a parliament or legislature. But during a emergency, if the Lok Sabha is not in session, because the parliament is approved to exercise the power of the state legislative assemblies, if the Lok Sabha is not in sessions, the power is given to the president that it can allow the appropriation of fund from the consolidated fund of state, which has to be approved by the parliament when it comes into session. Is this clear? This is Article 357. Any doubt? Anything you want to ask? Anyone? No? So let's see certain differences between 352 and 356. Now there is one judgment, that SR Bomani case judgment has been left and 360 is left. चलिए, so now we will see the differences. Difference between Article 352 This will give you an idea related to the difference and what happens in 356 and 352. So the first difference between the 352 and 350, when the 352 is imposed, state legislature is not suspended. When national emergency is imposed, state legislature is not suspended. So here we can say that state legislature assembly is not suspended. What will happen when the 356 is imposed? Suspended and dissolved. State legislative assembly is suspended and dissolved. Then what about the executive? Continue to function during the 352, right? So state legislative, executive continue to function. But in 356, executive and legislature are controlled by the center. We have seen the president, 356 clause 1a, that the whatever the function is performed by the governor is performance all overtaken by the president, and executive is taken by the executive. But in this, the executive and legislature is continue to function, though they are in a suspended form. But here the executive and legislature comes under the central control. 356 clause 1 AB. Yes or no? President assume the power of all or any of the functions exercised by the governor. Parliament assume all. President allows to parliament to assume all or any of the power performed by the state legislative assembly. Means legislative power was assumed by the parliament, and executive power, which is performed by the governor, is performed by the president. So it means the legislature and the executive under 356 both come under the direct control of a central government or union government. Is this clear? And here says the central government get concurrent power of legislation and administrations of legislation and administrations of all states, right? And when the 352 is imposed, or what will be here? Only the state where the president rule is imposed. So the relationship of only the state with which the center is affected. 356 सिर्फ उसी स्टेट का रिलेशनशिप अफेक्ट होगा where the president rule is imposed. So here we can say that, here we can write that the relationship of only the state with the center is affected. Only the state which is affected. पूरा state मतलब हाँ, if whole of a nation is been the imposed, हाँ बिल्कुल, but in general terms with the national emergency is imposed like in 75 or many of the states, then it can be imposed in a relationship of the whole state of the comes under the direct control. नहीं, इसमें रिस्ट्रिक्ट तो एक ही स्टेट हो सकता, मान लीजिए पूरे में एक ही स्टेट में प्रेसिडेंट रूल लगाए, So only that affected states. ठीक है? Then national emergency can continue for a period of 6 months by each resolutions of parliament for indefinite period. So we can say that next, we can say next is national emergency can continue for 6 months with each resolution for indefinite period. Means the national emergency can continues for any number of period, but each approval the give the life to it's only for the 6 months. Similarly here, but the maximum period is not indefinite. Maximum period is 3 years. So we can say that in the case of national emergency, the life get an indefinite period. But in this case, once approval, the life will get to the 6 months after each approval, and the maximum period is 3 years. Is this clear? Any doubt? No. In national emergency, during the national emergency, the parliament itself regulate the law related to the states. But in case of president rule, it may regulate itself, or it may give power to the president, or it may delegates power to any other. 357. So in case of national emergency, the parliament regulate laws related to states itself. But in case of 356, it can delegate the power to the president also, or by itself it can also impose, or it can allows the president to delegate his power to the other authorities also. Article 357. Yes or no? Right? So the parliament allows president to formulate laws, or parliament allows the president to delegate his power to other authority. Article 357. So these are the differences between 352 and 356. Is this clear? Any doubt? Now here the satisfaction is similar. First, the satisfaction to the president is not alone, it is meant to the satisfaction of cabinet and also the president. The satisfactions of the, see, the cases has been many difference. There is one which I said that the in 77 when the Janta government came into power, they have forced the 9 states council of ministers to suggest the governor to impose a president rule. The governor who give a report to the president is not his constitutional discretionary. He has to act on advice of a council of ministers. So in case of president rule, the satisfaction is not only related to the president but also related to the governor, and the satisfaction is not alone the governor but also the cabinet of that state. They have to be satisfied that the situation has arisen when the president rule has been imposed. Are you getting my point? Any doubt? So this is all from the 352 to 369, 59. We have also completed 365. Now the financial emergency is left. That is it will take around 20 minutes. Then will we start the amendment to the constitution, 368. And then there are certain laws which has to be discussed in 1 or 2 days. We will complete this sheet. Then we will start. Last slide you want. This one. This one. And central government get concurrent power with power and legislation and power of legislation and administrations of all states. So there is one judgment is left to be written under this is SR Bomai case. Shall we continue or do in the next class? Chaliye then. Thank you. If they want, they can keep. If they want, they can repeal. What I'm saying, during the emergence, during president rule, if certain laws has been made or changes has been done in the state list or by the either by the president or by a, you can say this